Get ready, because here's something pretty crazy and amazing too. Today's episode is number 100. 100 episodes. Now, who would have thought? But without you, the amazing listeners, the amazing followers, and our awesome guests, this just would not have been possible. So, to all you guests and listeners, a very, very heartwarming thank you. And also, one last one. I want to give a shout out to my crazy daughter, Cody O'Connor Kyle. Now, she's the one that suggested this episode, and so we're listening because of you, Cody. Today, one of those amazing guests, Dr. Shirley Strum, she joins me. Now, she's a world-renowned anthropologist, and she's been studying baboons for well over 5 decades, and the story she has to tell, it's wild. Baboons. The info is limitless. There's so much to tell, but for me, they've always been a little scary. Now, I love these old movies, and there's one old movie I remember from way back when, Flight of the Phoenix. And that baboon part of the story, really, really scary. But as Shirley will tell us, baboons avoid aggression. It's their last line of defense. So all those movies with crazy baboon scenes, well, they're way, way over-exaggerated. Now, we get into the importance of women in the baboon troops, their hierarchy, the decisions they make. We get into how politics, baboon politics, plays a huge part in their social structure, and so much more. And so much more, it's just way too much to get into this intro. So get ready, because Shirley is going to give you the incentive to possibly make baboons your new favorite primate.
For real, 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 for real. Got a bunch of furry friends and I love them all the same. I'm an animal lover, veterinarian is the name. Let's share some pet stories from heartwarming to strange, losses and games from wacky to insane. For real. You're now tuned in to For Real with your host, Mark Kyle.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to the For Real Podcast. Today, my guest is Shirley Strum, and we are going to have a really good time today. Shirley, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
Well, it's a privilege for me, and I know you're busy, and we've got time change and all that kind of stuff, but thanks again, really, for being on the show, and I know everybody that's listening is going to absolutely love your story.
Okay, I hope so.
Oh, I know so. So let's start at the beginning. I'm guessing, just based on where you've been to school and that, are you originally from California?
Yes, yeah, I am. But I'm a naturalized citizen. So my parents were sponsored to come to the United States after World War II. And so I didn't come to Kenya until I came for my PhD research.
Wow. So, but let's get in a little bit of you. So you're in California. Were you like in San Diego, or is that where you're from originally?
That's where I'm from originally, but I did all my degrees at Berkeley, which was back in the day when there were no other places except perhaps Harvard that had any primate behavior. And so when I got done with my PhD, I had an offer from University of California, San Diego. And I hesitated, but my mentor at that time, Sherwood Washburn, said to me, because I had several offers, he said, if you want to have a family, take San Diego. And if you want to have a career, take UCLA. And I didn't at that point want to have a family, but it was an offer I couldn't refuse, which was that I was the only biological, well, at that time it was called physical anthropologist in the department. And they said, I'm sorry, we have no colleagues for you. And I said, well, that's fine. The baboons are my colleagues. And so I had an unwritten contract and an unwritten, without any precedent, agreement that I would be able to spend as much time in the field as I would like because baboons were my colleagues.
That's awesome. So, but I'm going to ask you, so how early did you know that baboons or primates were your thing?
I actually started my undergraduate work at Berkeley looking for a more scientific way to approach human behavior.
Huh.
And I tried lots of things, including biology and criminology, and you wouldn't believe, and psychology. But when I got to anthropology, and especially at the time called physical anthropology, Washburn had all of us in the audience just enraptured. And he was lecturing to more than 1,000 students, and you could hear a pin drop. And so at that point, I thought that human evolution was going to be my area. But as I investigated archaeology and some other options, I realized that I really wanted to understand behavior, and the evolutionary perspective and the primate perspective on behavior was what appealed to me.
It's funny as I think about my university days, there's always a few professors that always will stand out and resonate you for the rest of your life. Obviously, you had one of those. That's amazing.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool. So you decided to do this. What are the next steps, and when do you really actually start spending time with the baboons? And I have so many questions for you. By the way, I say this at every episode. My mind bounces all over the place, so there's no strategy to my thought process. So if I hear you say something, it may take me down some wormhole that I'm going to ask you. So I apologize right away.
Okay. Well, I actually didn't want to study baboons to begin with. I wanted to study paddis monkeys, which were another alternative to what was called back then the baboon model. They had a different kind of social organization, and I wanted to study them. But Washburn said they were done, although they'd only been studied for 6 months. And baboons were the most studied at that time of wild species because there were 3 studies. And the interesting thing about the baboon model was that it appeared to ask the question and answer it. What would a puny primate who invaded the savannah, as we knew at that time that early humans had, face? And what surprised the 3 scientists was that despite studying different species and different locations, so one was in Nairobi Park, one was in Amboseli, so those are olive baboons and yellow baboons, and one was in southern Africa, that was chacma baboons, that they all seem to have the same social organization. And at that point, people were really thinking about not only were baboons a good model for early human evolution, but maybe they were a good model for all primates. And it was a male-based model, ironically, because only the males were identified. And I'm not saying this as a criticism because I'm standing on their shoulders, but I decided that if I was going to test the baboon model, that I wanted to use some of the techniques that came from captive studies, because I wanted to answer the question of there were already a few primate studies after the baboon studies, and these seem to have different behaviors and different social organizations. And I wanted to answer the question, was this really a reflection of the different species, or was it a reflection of the biases that people had at the time?
Hmm.
So I went out and I, I had read everything that was published then, which it's not possible today, about baboons. Most of it was captive baboons, but there were a few field studies. But nothing prepared me for the savannah, for being just swept away with what it looked like to be with all those big animals. And I really didn't get to see baboons until I came to the baboon study site. But the savannah was incredibly different than I imagined. It was vast, it was wild, at least it seemed wild to me back then. And it was so unlike anything that I had ever experienced in my life in California.
So this is what, 50 or 60 years ago, right?
Yeah, yeah, it was 1972. So things have changed a lot in Kenya.
Well, still though, and as we were talking, I've been to Kenya several times. What's crazy when you land at the airport and you're driving along the road, you can see zebras and giraffes running around. So I can only imagine what it was like 60 years ago. I mean, even now you see, matter of fact, I've seen the baboons along the highway at different times.
Yes, yeah.
But that's not what we're talking about. I know what we're talking about, but I can't even imagine. It must have been you must have been awestruck.
Yeah, it was breathtaking. And then I went to watch the baboons. Now, I wasn't the first person. Bob Harding, who was also a Berkeley student, was the first person, but he and his subsequent replacement watched them from inside a VW camper. They didn't feel that it was safe to go out. So I decided that if I was going to identify individuals and get the kind of information I wanted to have, I would have to get them used to seeing me outside of the van. And when I think about it now, thinking back on it, I mean, I took a lot of chances.
Obviously.
Yeah, but I'm thinking that bravery is just your lack of knowledge, not anything. It's not courage. It's just not knowing what you're getting into.
Don't know what you don't know.
Exactly. You don't know what you don't know. Exactly. So I got them used to me being outside of the van. And I did that by habituating them slowly. And I spent months getting them used to me being on the edge of the troop.
Mm-hmm.
And I still feel that all these graduate students who've come to study the baboons, none of them have the kind of feeling for the animal that I have, and I still have it in terms of not wanting to interfere. I mean, there was one graduate student who ran behind his consort pairs, and I just think that habituation and winning the trust of the baboons was a real accomplishment, and it made a lasting impact on me.
Well, they were colleagues too.
Yes, they were. The baboons really were.
Well, and I get that. I really do. If it's your passion, you want to respect them the same way. It's funny is, I just did an interview. It came out this week with the Ulis Karanth. He's
Oh, I know him. Yeah, I mean, I know of him.
oh, you do?
Yeah,
Well, he talks about the same thing because he was really the first guy to really get out there and study the Bengal tigers, right?
right,
And what happened? He did the same thing. They got used to seeing his, I think it's Suzuki or whatever, over a period of time. So they were never threatened by his car because they got used to it. So he got to see all these things that nobody ever got to see because they got used to it.
right.
Same idea.
Same idea. Absolutely the same.
Yeah, yeah.
And then I started to learn the different animals. And although previous studies mostly identified adult males, I decided I was going to identify them all, including the males that were perhaps low ranking and including the females and the youngsters and that. And so that took up a lot of time.
Well, I'm glad you did because one is I know you've debunked some of the theories and the hierarchy and the interrelationship between the males and the females.
For real, 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 for real.
And we'll be right back. We are supported by PrepVet, providing stem cell therapy for pets.
As a pet lover, did you know your pet can benefit from the incredible healing power of stem cell therapy? Prep Therapy offers a groundbreaking solution taken right from your pet's own blood. Say goodbye to joint pain, arthritis, kidney and liver conditions, and more. They'll experience faster recovery, increased vitality, and extended quality of life without the need for surgery or harmful drugs. Put the wag back in their tail and discover Prep Therapy today at prepvet.com. Save 10% with promo code FurRealPodcast, covered by most pet insurance.
One of the things I've read too is, again, when I try to do a little bit of homework, so I know a little bit what I'm talking about, but how they're within their troop, or is it always a troop or is it a harem? I saw two different things in there. What's the best thing, troop?
It's a troop because it's not a harem. Is a different. It's Hamadryas baboons,
Okay.
Or West African baboons.
Okay.
And this is a multi-male, multi-female. Half of the troop is youngsters, and troop is the right name.
Okay, good. So what I read, which I thought was really fascinating, I want to get into the relationship between the male and the females anyways, but how that when you're in the troop, you start low and it's very, very political. They really kind of work it's very similar to the humans, what I read, and that they kind of politically work their way up in the hierarchy. Is that kind of how it works?
So it's different depending on whether you're a male or a female.
Okay.
Yeah. A male mostly leaves the group to go to another group. And as a stranger, he is feared because no one can predict his behavior.
Right.
And so he becomes high ranking, but the whole social network is based on making relationships and having other baboons trust you. So in the process of making these relationships, he might be falling in rank, but he's more effective in terms of competing with other males for females, for example. But females are very different. They have an incredibly stable hierarchy. And that's because it's sort of constructed. I mean, I've never seen it happen in front of me, but I can imagine that it's constructed by something called reproductive value. And you don't have to think about it. I mean, baboons don't think, oh, we're going to structure our relationships with each other this way. But reproductive value means that a mother will support her youngest offspring against all the others. And so within the family, you have a reverse age hierarchy.
Huh.
So let's say the female hierarchy that I delineated in 1972 is still the same hierarchy that existed in 2020. Maybe not now. I don't know. I'm still looking at the data. Even though there have been some matriline's that have gone extinct, or let's put it this way, I don't know what happened to the males, but in terms of the females in the troop, they don't exist anymore. So the female hierarchy is extremely stable. It's created by evolutionary principle that I think makes sense. And then I recently rethought about what the hierarchy is for, because one of the questions that people have been asking for a long time, and there's no answer, is why do low-ranking females stay in the group? And I think the answer is because the female rank, which organizes the majority of the troop, is not about status equals resources. It's about predictability. And that's a real issue for baboons. If you can imagine each time you took a step, either for foraging or for social, and you had to negotiate with whoever you were passing or whoever you were going to, you wouldn't have enough time to do any of the survival activities. So by having a predictable female hierarchy, you have an order that is incredibly stable, that's created by an evolutionary principle that you don't have to even be aware of. And I think, and this is speculation on my part, that the dynamic male system, in which a male might not hold his rank for even 6 months, is made possible because the female part of the troop is so stable. So I think one of the reasons that the males can be as dynamic as they are, again, not with them thinking about it, is because the females are so stable. So while I think what you've read is probably the consensus view,
Mm-hmm.
these baboons have changed my ideas about all of that.
Oh, wow. So one of the things, tell me if this is right. So one of the things I read, and it sounds like it is that when the female has the babies, the males leave the troop, what you said, but the daughters stay within the troop for the entire time, and that's part of that stability that you're talking about, I guess, right?
Right. So males normally, youngsters who grow up to be large males, normally leave the troop. And people have said that's because that's a way to avoid inbreeding, which is probably the case. But I've had some cases where, because of the fusion of two troops, there are a lot more unrelated females than there are in a normal troop. And so some males just don't leave.
Huh. So so they this is kind of interesting. So basically, the male leaves, and then somebody from some other troops comes in. So a new male comes into the troop. Is that how that works?
That's right. And there could be long periods where there are no new males.
Right.
And then there can be periods where there are a lot of new males coming in. And very often among those new males might be even brother pairs.
Oh, like two may come in.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And the two might be related to each other.
Huh. And then how many in a troop on average?
Well, the average size is about 50, but the focus group in my study, because there was an invasive cactus that you might know, it's called a prickly pear,
Yeah.
Opuntia stricta. It invaded, and its ripe fruits are almost like human foods. Tons of water, lots of sugars, lots of micronutrients, and it's about the size of my fist.
Right.
So that group, we do a census of the different baboon groups, and they've grown to over 100, and some have gotten as large as 150. But there comes a point where the size of the group makes it difficult for them to coordinate. And that's partly because they don't have language, and they don't have symbols, and they don't have material culture.
Oh, they don't. I didn't know that.
Yeah, they have nonverbal communication, meaning postures,
Right.
facial expressions, gestures, eye things. And we have that as well.
Sure.
But we have language on top of it, and language lets us scale up our society, and it also lets humans lie, cheat, and exploit each other.
Oh, great.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that the baboons actually made me look at the process. In other words, not just the outcome. Most anthropologists and most evolutionary biologists talk about the outcome. But by them forcing me to look at process, it made me realize how different the social interaction of humans and of baboons are. And even though I think baboons are the most sophisticated of any non-human yet described, um, they still have a glass ceiling of social complexity that they cannot break without these new human characteristics. And we were just lucky to happen upon those, because that allowed us, the good part, it allowed us to um, thrive. And the bad part is that it allowed us to thrive too much.
That's interesting. So, in other words, since they can't really tell each other, they say something because they're angry. They can't say that, so they're not hurting somebody's feelings at some point and saying something they regret later.
Yeah,
They may puff up their cheeks or something, but that's not something that you can really. That's interesting.
yeah.
Now you got me thinking all kinds of crazy things.
Okay.
That's great.
One of the things that was clear to me in watching the baboons, especially in watching them in this human age, where things are happening so fast that I can actually see them change as opposed to speculating about what they might have done over tens or hundreds of thousands of years. It made me realize that we all assume that social groups exist because they exist when we start our study. But what is the process by which they get created? And when you think about what symbols and language and cooperation and material culture, what that does to the nature of social interactions, you get a better sense of not I'm not saying anything new about these being important human landmarks,
Sure.
but I'm saying that you need to think about the impact they had on how individuals relate and interact with each other socially. And when you do that, you realize what what how important they are to making us who we are.
Oh, it totally does that. I was thinking, one of the things I did an episode with, and it's related, but not that related, but it's just me babbling, but with the guide dogs for the blind. And what you don't realize with people with blind, they don't get to see all those, looks of somebody's face and all that. They can just,
Yeah,
they lose one of those, one of the
senses.
senses. There you go. Thank God you're here. Anyway, but anyways, you lose one and they have to learn how to communicate differently.
Yes, that's right. And that's why blind people have a much greater sense of space and hearing and touch
Right.
than any of us do. Yeah.
Right.
So again, that just shows how it's the process of how you interact that creates the outcome. And that's a pretty revolutionary statement for me to make because everybody else before focused on the outcome. What's the outcome of reproductive success? Well, individuals do these kind of things. And looking at how those human characteristics have changed the way we interact with each other is quite an unusual perspective.
Absolutely. So here's a question. So the one or two brothers or two come in from a different troop in there. Once they come there, do they stay there forever, or how does that work?
No,
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 they just keep moving around.
they stay for up to 4 or 5 years. They might, one might leave right away if he's not able to make these social advances and get females to trust him. Then he's going to try his hand in another group. But even with ones who manage, and it's a slow process to create relationships with females, by the time a male has been a resident about 5 years,
Uh huh.
his babies, his female babies, are becoming sexually mature. And I've seen a couple cases where a male tries to copulate with a female who might be related to him, but from the behavioral data certainly was. And she just slaps him. And then he leaves the troop.
And so they're just moving from troop to troop and trying to procreate with whatever females they can. That's kind of what they're doing when they're trying to get the relationship in there. Is that what they're doing?
Yeah, but they're using the relationship in order to
Be a boss.
no. So leadership is something very different in these baboons
Okay.
than what you normally read about. And it's usually the females, and especially the older females, who have the most influence when it comes to foraging decisions. They know where the food is. They know where the food is when it's very, very dry or in a drought or whatever. So they're the leaders, and that's everyone responds to them. But if it comes a time for you to be frightened or to be defended, then these males, but males who are friends of females, not males in general, which is what the original baboon model suggested, that the relationships are the key thing, and males defend females and infants that they have relationships with, not other females and infants. But fortunately, most females and infants have male friends, so they'll have someone who will defend them. But during those times, it's the male who is the leader. So under some contexts, circumstances, you have females who are the leader, and in others, you have males who are the leader.
Huh. So one of the things, I think I read this a long time ago, actually, maybe when I was in Kenya. So during the real bad dry seasons, sometimes they're forced to eat those prickly pears, right?
Right. Well, they walked past these prickly pears and treated it not like food until it was widespread. And then they started to eat it. And they ate it in the rainy season and the dry season. It didn't really
Oh,
matter. Yeah. There are other kinds of cactus that are here that they had. There was another Opuntia species that they knew from before the translocation, but it didn't have the same characteristics that this one did. And what's interesting about Opuntia stricta, which is from the Georgia Rocky Coast, it's not a desert-adapted plant, is that it produces so many fruits that animals don't have to eat the pads. And so they don't browse down plant as they eat the fruits, and then they break off pieces, and you've got vegetative growth, and the baboons distribute the seeds in their feces, and it just spreads like wildfire.
so they're one. Well, most of the animals, if they're eating it, they're spreading the seeds too. But they're one of the ones that are helping that as well. That's crazy.
Right, yes, but it wasn't because they had to eat it. It was because they wanted to eat it once it spread.
Yeah, I was there. They got used to it. They was there all the time.
For real, 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 for real.
And we'll be right back. We are supported by PrepVet, providing stem cell therapy for pets.
As a pet lover, did you know your pet can benefit from the incredible healing power of stem cell therapy? Prep Therapy offers a groundbreaking solution taken right from your pet's own blood. Say goodbye to joint pain, arthritis, kidney and liver conditions, and more. They'll experience faster recovery, increased vitality, and extended quality of life without the need for surgery or harmful drugs. Put the wag back in their tail and discover Prep Therapy today at PrepVet.com. Save 10% with promo code FurRealPodcast, covered by most pet insurance.
I want to get back into the male-female relationships, but for people who are listening, can you tell people that don't know, other than seeing them in the movies and things like that, or maybe in a zoo, tell them the characteristics of baboons and, their size and all that kind of stuff too. And I know that they're omnivores and all that kind of stuff. Just a little bit of that. And I'm going to get back into, because I'm really curious about this male-female thing.
Okay. All right. So male baboons are almost twice the size of females. They're about 70 pounds. They have the anatomy of aggression, which is one of the early appeals of the baboon model. It's one of the few cases where we could understand back then how evolution actually creates certain anatomical and behavioral things. So they have a big mantle of hair which stands up. They have hair, not fur. Each one is like ours. It's in it's individually planted, not like fur.
Oh,
And males have these big canines, and they have longer muzzles for the canines to develop in, and then they descend. And their molars, their lower molars, are adapted to, when they open and close their mouth, they sharpen the backside of these canines.
Oh,
But the canines are not carnivore canines. They are very brittle and they break easily. So um, this anatomy, a male was built like for the anatomy of aggression. Large size, big mantle of hair, white eyelids, these long teeth. And yet, so females are half the size. They don't have those big canines, so they don't have the long muzzle. They don't have a big mantle of hair around. They do have white eyelids. But what I discovered was that even though the males were built for aggression, aggression is very risky, and they had social strategies that they used in order to compete and defend themselves, compete for females and defend themselves against other males. And females also had social strategies. So, can I give you an example of a male social strategy?
yeah, absolutely.
Okay. This one is called agonistic buffering. It's a big word, but it basically means aggression and submission. And the buffering part means that the following: if you have two males, one of which is about to lose the encounter, he might leave and get a baby to bring back. Now, it's a bit more complicated than that because the troop does not defend a male, but it does defend an infant and a female. And before the translocation, I saw males use females this way as well as infants. But since translocation, I haven't seen that. Anyway, the reason it works is that if the infant doesn't trust you, the male who gets it, then he will scream at your opponent. He will scream at you,
Right.
and instead of at your opponent, and you will be mobbed by the group and be pushed to the edge of the group. And mobbing is like a one-time learning situation. It's not very nice, and you end up being on the edge for a number of hours.
Outcast.
So first you first have to create a relationship. You have to create trust in an infant. And it's better if you get an infant that when it's born, it's black, and at about a year old, it turns to the gray olive color. So you want to be around a mother with her black infant, but she won't let you around unless you're already friends with her. So you have to build a relationship with the infant in order to be able, and with the mother, in order to be able to use it to turn off the aggression of your opponent. And the first time I saw this, I was about to score, a win-lose kind of thing. And then this guy came back with a little infant, and that was the end of the encounter. And I saw it so many times after that it made sense to me.
Well, it makes sense.
So that's an example of a social strategy of defense. In other words, males don't use aggression because it's so risky, unless they are new to the group. And because they're new, they haven't yet formed the relationships. But as soon as they form relationships, they may be declining in dominant status, but they have a lot more success with females. For the females, one example I can give you, which is actually not just for females, it's for the male as well. There was a male who captured a young Thompson's gazelle, and his good friend female friend came over and sat nearby. And she then groomed him. And grooming is this, it creates a stupor in the baboons because it's like our massage.
Right.
Yeah. So she groomed him until he was in a stupor, and then she reached around and grabbed the young gazelle and ran away with it. So a couple days later, he caught another gazelle. And this time, he, every time she stopped grooming and was about to reach for the gazelle, he put his hand down on it. So there was this, like predator prey kind of thing.
Yeah,
But
sure.
it means that females also benefit from their relationships, and they do have social strategies of defense, meaning if you're by a big male who's a friend of yours, other females are not going to bother you. Or even competition, which is a female trying to compete with a male for a prey item that he caught. And in baboons, possession is 90% of the law. So basically, you can't be that easily intimidated if you have the carcass.
So it sounds like these guys are really, really intelligent, obviously.
Yes.
Why is there any theory why they haven't developed any form of like verbal communication or anything like that? I mean, it sounds like it almost, just from, ecologically, they would just do that or whatever.
Okay.
Evolutionary, I mean, that's a bad word.
Yeah, that seems embedded in something that we call human exceptionalism, the idea that every species is trying to be us. And what my answer to that is that baboons are doing really, really well. I mean, not right this moment because of human expansion into their natural world. But there was a time when there were more baboons in Africa than there were people. And so they are incredibly smart, incredibly adaptable, and they can, I mean, one of the reasons humans hate them so much is, and they have such a bad reputation, is that they come up against farmers, for example,
Right.
and they outsmart the farmers. So, so it's right now, I think baboons are not an endangered species, but I've been to Cape Town a couple times to try and make some comment about their human baboon conflict. Have you ever been to Cape Town?
Yeah, I've been all over. I've been all over South Africa, actually.
Okay, so in that situation, there's hardly any options for the baboons because people have expanded and taken what their natural home range was.
Right.
And also in that case, and I'm sorry to say this, but I wrote a letter to the Cape Town Times saying the same thing. I think that the animal rights activists are in the wrong because for so many years, the only thing they let the monitors, and Cape Town spends $1 million a year on monitors, the only thing the monitors could do was to clap. And my study of the development of crop rating made it really clear that the costs have to exceed the benefits for you to be able to stop anything. So, because the animal rights activists had captured the media, they allowed this tradition to happen. And now we're at a situation where the animals have, the baboons have expanded, and there's a big division between those who are saying they need to be killed. I don't want to say culled because killing is what it is.
Right.
And those who say that absolutely not one hair of one baboon should be touched. So I actually forgot where we were going with that.
I don't know, but I don't remember either. But because it's just too fascinating to go there. But so anytime in my experience now, and yours would be more extensive than mine, when I talk to anybody of any kind of species, if they're endangered or there's a trouble, it's generally because the humans have encroached on where they were, pretty much across the board.
Well, all all human wildlife conflict is because of humans,
Right.
and it's the animals who always pay the price.
Well, the same thing goes for, and along with that is that you've got these farmers now, and like you said, the baboons have outsmarted them, so now they're losing their crops, and so what they're doing, they're probably killing them,
Mm,
doing everything, the orangutans and all that kind of stuff. Same idea, right?
yeah.
So one of the things back to Ulis, his theory is that you've got to have specific areas for animals as well as a specific area for humans. Sometimes you move the humans out of the area because they've encroached upon their land earlier, but that's never going to happen in my mind. I don't see how it works.
No, I don't think it does work. I think that coexistence is a way to turn a win-lose situation into a win-win situation, but it requires compromise. And because we've taken so much, we haven't compromised, the animals have compromised. And so we need to figure out how to create options so that subsistence farmers and subsistence pastoralists, both of whom I've lived with and next to with the baboons, have options.
And it's also educating humans.
Oh, absolutely. But it's so hard to change human behavior.
I know, because we're so much better than everybody else.
No, because we're so entrenched.
Because we can communicate.
Yeah, that's right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I want to get back to, let's get back on track here, because I want to go back, because I know I want to talk a little bit about your book that you had that came out a long time ago, and I want to know who the Pump House Gang is, because I love the name. But also I want to talk about the male female. I know you've talked about it a little bit, but it sounds to me what you're saying. One is that originally they were thought that the males really just all they wanted to do is mate with the females, and that's not it. But now it sounds to me like the females are really controlling the troop at the most part, right? Other than unless it's some aggressive situation.
Right. I think there's a pretty good balance between females and males in different circumstances. I think what I've discovered over the many, many decades that I've watched them is their complexity. I mean, scientists, and I don't blame them, start out being having to simplify things in order to begin studying it. And then they start to believe that the system is simple. And what I hope to do in both books is demonstrate how complex baboons are. And I'm certain that there are many more animals out there that we haven't studied that are equally complex.
Well, yeah. So, but isn't that across the board? I think we go in assuming that we're going to think like us first. We're not thinking about like them. Basically, isn't that what it comes down to?
Yeah, yeah.
One of the things again, when I was doing this thing, I didn't realize, do they climb trees at all? I know they're more terrestrial and they walk on all fours. They're the only primate, I think, that does that all the time versus standing up on two. Is that right?
No,
Okay.
a lot of monkeys, most monkeys, including the New World monkeys and Old World monkeys, all walk on fours, all fours, and they baboons also spend quite a bit of time in trees, depending on what food is around.
Okay. So what I read was wrong,
Yeah.
or maybe I just interpreted wrong, which is more than likely at the end of the day.
Okay.
Yeah. So what about when I'm sure you know the movie, The Flight of the Phoenix.
No.
Where they had well, it was a movie, and they're out in the middle of the desert, and these baboons come in, and they're these mean guys, right? So movies really portray them as really these vicious
Yeah.
things, and they're really. I mean, tell me what the truth is.
Well, I like to joke with friends that I'd rather have a baboon as president than a human as president because baboons can't lie, they can't cheat, and they don't exploit each other.
They're not worried about money.
And they're not worried about money. And they already have the equivalent of a golden rule, which is without language, a social contract which says, do unto me as I would do unto you, or some version of that, because they really need each other in order to survive and to thrive. And so I think that highlights the difference between baboons and people, but also the that early baboon model had a great influence on films and on media portrayals of baboons. And more recently, the fact that there's so much conflict in southern Africa between baboons and humans has actually given them a bad reputation, which they don't deserve, because, as you said, it's usually a people problem. And I would say the wild animals, always pay the price.
I think what I read was that aggression is really their last form of things. They try to do things differently than have aggression right away until they're forced into that situation.
That's right. If they don't have any options, then males will fight, and so will females. But since aggression is risky because you can get injured and that injury can have a big effect, you need to find other ways, less risky ways, and these social strategies are less risky ways to try to compete and defend yourself. And I would agree that aggression is the last stand. It's the last hope.
When you go out, you've been going out to the troop for such a long time. Has it got to the point now? Because we talked earlier, and we haven't talked about it in here, but do they ever come up? Do you ever like hand feed them or anything like that? Do they come to you that close, or are you always kind of at a distance?
I'm always close, but I never feed them.
Have you ever touched one?
I touched one that was anesthetized for the translocation, and I just had an orgy of touching.
I'll bet.
But I wouldn't. It's very tempting to try and interact with them. But if you do, and it's positive, it means that you are also a potential subject for threats and redirections and things like that. So, because they're wild and because they're habituated,
Yeah,
it's really important never to interact and never to feed them. And I don't ever I make people leave or go further away from the troop if they have to eat something, and then take all of their trash with them in their backpack, because the baboons will find whatever there is that's left there.
sure. Well, it's kind of like at a much very very simpler thing. The bears in the Yosemite now they've been basically domesticized almost.
Yes, they have. And it's a problem, a people problem. And bears, it makes sense to bears to try and get these
It's easy.
easy to digest large packages of nutrition,
Sure.
which is human food, rather than all their berries and things. I mean, I've never studied bears, but in studying baboons, I've realized that it takes about 2 hours to forage to get enough to be equivalent to, let's say, one maize cob. So of course you're not, if you have a chance to get a maize cob
Sure.
or a loaf of bread or whatever it is that the bears take, you're going to do it.
And I mean, in the purity of their natural habitat, you want to keep them the animals they are versus the one we've corrupted or whatever you want to call it.
Yes, exactly, exactly.
Do you know that the horses in Corolla, the horses in Outer Banks, in in North Carolina, and that those horses have never been, if something really bad happens to them and they have to bring in a vet, they're now culled out of the herds because they want to keep them 100% wild. So they've never treated there they live. They swim from island to island and do whatever they do, but they want to keep the purity of who they are, which I think is really cool.
Yeah, it is. I don't know about them, but it sounds like a good call.
Well, it sounds like what you're doing anyway. So let's talk about both your books and a little bit about that, so people can know, and we can point everybody how to find your books and learn more about these guys.
Okay, so the first book was a long time ago. It was 1987, and it was called Almost Human: A Journey into the World of Baboons. Then it was reprinted in paperback by Norton, and the original one hardback was Random House, and then it was reprinted in paperback by Norton, and I added a new epilogue to the University of Chicago Press paperback. The one that's coming out now is called Echoes of Our Origins: Baboons, Humans, and Nature. And it's about to be published or to be available September 9th.
Oh, good timing. I didn't know that. Perfect.
Yeah. And I didn't think I had another book in me, but my husband insisted that I did. And I was just wrote this book over 12 years. And it's funny because when I started it, there were some questions that I didn't have answers to. But because the process was so long, and because I'm looking back on 50 years of research, I actually found some answers to things. So that one is published by Johns Hopkins University Press. It's not a scientific book. It's what's called a trade book. So it's written for a popular audience.
Oh, great. But and that's going to be out September 9th. And for everybody listening, that'll be in the description where you can find it. That. But one thing we kind of did not get into, and I want to get into this before we sign off on this thing, is about your baboon project, the one that you started long time ago. I think it's one of the longest operating foundations that's still active today.
Yes, that's true. It I thought I was going to have to close it in December of 2021, but because I'm an oldie and I was running out of money. But I found some young collaborators, and it was so fortuitous because although they know how to write grants, they actually care about understanding baboons, which is very unusual these days. So the project is still going. It's called the Wasanyero Baboon Project. And I did a number of things over the years. I was the first one to study crop rating in a naive set of groups. I then did the first scientific translocation of primates in 1984. And I've been monitoring that since 1984, so it's been a long time. But also the first Opuntia stricta, I treated the plant as if it were a baboon, and so I studied it in a way that made it possible for me to understand the dynamics of how it invades. And so the current group of people, younger scientists who are interested and out there, have their specific kinds of questions to ask about the social behavior of baboons, but it does rely on my 50 years of research and this fairly unorthodox way of interpreting some of the things that I find among baboons.
Now, you take donations, I'm assuming.
No, we don't.
Or you don't?
No,
Oh, wow.
no.
I was going to tell everybody that's listening today if they wanted to help out, they could find out how to do that.
Oh,
I guess I need to buy your books instead.
yeah, that would be good. That would be great.
Okay, so what have we not covered that we should cover? I mean, we could talk for days. I could talk to you for days, but for some important points that we may have missed, is there anything that you can think of off the top of your head?
Well, I think we need to reset our ideas about early humans. I don't believe that any species, whether it's a close species like a chimpanzee or pygmy chimp, bonobo,
Hmm.
or a more distant species like a baboon, I don't think any of them can serve as a way to look at us. I think because we have had so much time. In the case of chimpanzees, it's 6 million years that they've been separated and we've been separated. But more than that, it's because humans are really unique in these characteristics, even if we want to find the origins of some of them in other animals, which we tend to want to do. We need to rethink how we're considering the earliest humans. And so there are many things that humans are credited with, which the baboons already have. So if baboons are that smart, that socially sophisticated, have this complex dynamic and all of that, then there's no reason to think that the earliest humans weren't at least that smart and that socially sophisticated and having that complex. And then you need to look at how these new human characteristics have influenced how we relate to each other.
I love that. Maybe we should all stop talking.
No, I think we've inherited too much.
Well, then I could never do a podcast.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah. We could just do visual, and I just make a lot of faces and push my hair up and do whatever I was doing.
Okay.
Okay. Anything else?
No, I think that's all. And I want to thank you for inviting me.
Oh, I'm so happy, but you've got to grin and bear it because I got to tell that silly joke now.
Okay. All right. I will grin and bear it.
Yeah, and please, you can tell me offline, but don't tell me how bad it is because I know how bad it is. But anyways, for everyone else who's listening, as I always say, I know you're cringing, but if you got grandkids, nieces, nephews, you want to be on the show, even your grandparents want to be on the show, whoever's listening, I will gladly always respond to you. If you email me at mkyle@forrealpodcast.com, I will have you guys on. You can tell the joke. That would be great. Also, one last thing too, if you've got a great idea that you want to have that you think would be a great episode for me, email me at that, mkyle@forrealpodcast.com. So anyways, I'm going to tell the joke again. It's your guys' fault because you're not calling and having your kids be on the show to tell it. So here we go. So here we go. Shirley, what is a baboon's favorite exercise?
Yeah. I think grooming.
Okay. You're going to be the good way, but this is a joke. So you're going to hate this.
All right.
They absolutely love going on the monkey bars, but occasionally they like doing chimp ups. Anyway, I told you.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
I know. I told you. Anyways, Shirley, thanks so much for being on the show. I so appreciate it. What a great episode this was. I'm just fascinated by these guys, and I love the fact that they're your colleagues. So thanks so much for being on the show.
You're more than welcome.
And then for everybody else that's listening, as I always say, you guys are the ones that make the show. And the reason I'm able to get guests like this is because you guys keep following and listening. And so from the bottom of my heart, really, thank you so much. For real.
That concludes this episode of For Real with your host, Mark Kyle. For previous and future episodes of For Real, listen via all major podcast streaming sites.